Well, good morning and welcome back. I'm now 6 months in with the Thunder Laser Bolt. I wanted to go over a few things I wish I had known on the first day that I've learned over the last 6 months, as well as let you know whether I would buy this bolt again if I was given the choice. Today on Laser Nug. Thanks for sticking around. I've got a lot of topics to cover today, so I'm going to get through them as quick as I can, many of which you may have seen or heard me say scattered throughout the other videos on my channel. But in the background, I'm just going to put this new acrylic sign together, give you something to watch instead of just seeing me sitting on a chair talking. Let's do this. Up first, the machine's got a 12 by 20 inch bed. It also does 1,000 millimeters per second and 2,000 lines per inch. But you'll learn that depending on what you're cutting, you don't always have a full 12 by 20, and you don't necessarily always want to be running at 1,000 millimeters or 2,000 LPI. Fast and highest resolution is not always the best result, depending on the material. The faster you run the power head, up to 1,000 millimeters, the more space the head is going to need on either end of your piece, or your engraving, to slow down, drop, and speed back up again to continue the next line of engraving. So that's going to remove space to some degree on either end. And if you're running a crosshatch, the same thing will occur vertically. So to answer the question I've received a few times as to why I often do my settings around 400, 500, 600 millimeters per second, that's why. If I'm engraving tumblers or coasters or things that are much smaller than 12 by 20, I'll try to create settings that are at a higher speed. But given the fact that I may want to do a very large engraving or a design piece, I try to create my settings at a lower speed so that I can use up as much of the usable 12 by 20 workspace as I can. That's why I often have settings that are kind of mid-range as opposed to at the higher end of the spectrum. But a helpful feature the Bolt has is it has intelligence built right into it. If you do intend to run at a high speed and you attempt to run too close to the X or Y axis, it'll actually come up with a warning message and tell you that you don't have enough distance to run at that speed given the size of the project. The second benefit or feature that it'll provide you, it's also got the intelligence built in to tell you when you don't have enough room in the workspace to run the job. In other words, if you run an 11 by 18 design and you set your origin down too low, it'll come up with a warning message to tell you you don't have enough space based on where you set your origin, and allows you then to reset your origin further up or further to the corner to allow for enough space in your workspace to run the complete job. It's pretty intelligent. Like any other tool in your workshop, the machine needs maintenance. It's super simple maintenance, but you got to do it. More specifically, you got to keep your lens and the mirrors clean all the time. So it's kind of a daily thing for me, depending on how much I'm using it each day, at least daily or every second day. Because remember, as you're engraving or cutting, there's a lot of debris or residue that's coming off of the piece from the laser, and that residue is sticking to your mirrors and your lens. And the more residue that builds up, the less power the laser is going to have because it's trying to cut through the residue or reflect out through the residue. So you want to keep them clean. It only takes a few minutes, but you got to do it. On a regular basis, you want to wash or at least wipe down the inside of the machine, because you have to keep those exhaust vents clear to allow it to suck any of the fumes that are coming off of the piece as you're engraving. And every 3-4 weeks, you need to go back into the exhaust vent itself, take those snap rings off, and clean the residue off of the fan blades. The more residue that's on those fan blades means the less efficient that fan is at exhausting things out the window. And you'll kind of tell when it's time, because you'll start to smell the odor of wood or MDF or acrylic burning when you normally wouldn't. That's a good indication that it's time to just clean off the fan blades. Again, super easy to do, but you got to do it. Speaking of lenses, if you're using the laser to run a business and you're selling product, I'd highly recommend you get additional or extra lenses. In the event that you accidentally crack a lens, or perhaps you haven't cleaned it in a long time, debris is built up, the laser's created heat and cracked the lens, you don't want to be without a lens for a week if you've got orders piling up every day. So spend the extra money, get an extra 1.5 or 2.5 or 4 inch lens. That way, if there is an issue, you just swap out. You can continue doing business and get your product out the door. If you haven't picked them up yet, you're eventually going to need what they call lay flat pins and or low profile magnets. When you're working with plywoods or acrylics, Romark, any sheets of material, especially the thinner stuff like the 1/8 or below, you're going to find that they crown or warp. And when you're running the laser, you need to make sure the piece sits as flat as possible on the honeycomb. And these are a big help in ensuring that happens. If you try to engrave something that's got a crown in it, you're going to find your engrave is going to come out very inconsistent because the laser is very sensitive to distance to the lens. Another welcome feature of this bolt is that it has a built-in camera. And for me, I didn't think it was going to be very useful, so I didn't hook it up for a couple of months. But now I use it all the time for smaller items, slate coasters, koozies, bottle openers, all kinds of different objects that are much smaller than the workspace itself. It's just so efficient to be able to use the camera to line up your designs on it, where it sits in the honeycomb, and press start. Far easier. Wish I'd done it on the first day when I set up the bolt. Are you finding that you tend to have lower power in different parts of the workspace than you do in others? That's pretty normal for any type of a laser setup that runs off of mirrors. You're always going to find that your highest power comes in the top left of your workspace, and it is natural and normal that it's going to be slightly less in the bottom right. That's because the beam is traveling a further distance to get to the engrave. So whenever I create settings, I make sure I test them at different spots throughout the workspace to make sure that it's strong enough, even in the bottom right-hand corner of the workspace, to do its job. Speaking of mirrors, if you find that you're losing power, check the alignment on your mirrors. It's a pretty simple test. You'll see I run it pretty regularly. Every couple of weeks I just test the alignment, especially before I'm going to do a job or a paying job, because I want to make sure that I've got maximum power that matches the settings I've created. And one of the things I always like to check every few weeks is I want to make sure that one of my mirrors hasn't bumped or moved slightly and caused a decrease in power. It's a simple test, and it's a simple fix if it's slightly out of alignment. Once you've done it once or twice, it's literally a couple of minute job. Very seldom have I had the mirror come out of alignment, but I can always tell if something's wrong because I can tell if my settings stop working or they're not cutting through the way they're supposed to. That's kind of an indication to me that I need to check the alignment to make sure that beam is right bang in the center of where it should be. Air assist or no air assist? Keep in mind I'm only 6 months in, but so far on all the materials I've tried, I find it's best not to use air assist on any regular engraves. I do use full air assist on cuts or on image engraves. And I always leave it at about 90-95% of the turn here. So it's not turned up all the way to 100, but I'm pretty close. And I literally leave it at that setting. I imagine perhaps in the future I may find a different type of material that I haven't used yet where I require some kind of an adjustment, but generally I run that air assist at almost full all the time whenever I use it. When you're sending your designs from Lightburn to the Bolt, take a moment to name the file, especially if you have designs that you plan on reusing again in the future or running repeatedly, because the Bolt has 1 gigabyte of memory in here. So when you're sending files that you may use again in the future, file name them properly because they'll get stored in your file menu here so that you can just pull them up easily right from the Bolt the next time you need them. Most importantly helpful, when you're running a design that you've got to cut off of different colors, whether there's different engrave or cut layers, if you send the same default file over that overwrites the last one and you find out that one of your cut settings was off and you have to recut it, now you've got to recreate that file or that part of the design and resend it to the Bolt. So if you're working on what I call a multi-layered product or project that has different colors or different materials being put together, label each one of them individually so that if one does mess up, all you've got to do is pull the file back up on the Bolt, press start, and it'll rerun it for you. So much simpler. If you plan on engraving cylindrical objects like tumblers or pet bowls, you're going to need a rotary. I have a pie burn grip. The burning question you're going to have is, what is the correct steps per rotation? For this pie burn unit, it is 8020. 8020 is the correct steps per rotation for the Thunderbolt. Your bolt has 4.3 inches of Z clearance, which means that you'll be able to successfully use that rotary for cylindrical objects up to 4 inches at the most in diameter. If you plan on engraving something larger than that, you're going to need either the harness for your pie burn grip, or you're going to need to purchase what they call a drop tray. This is a Roco twister. Gentleman down in the States sells it at Computer Creations. So one of the biggest challenges you'll probably face, as I did, is after you've plugged the bolt in, hooked it up to your computer, and you're ready to go, you've got a couple of pieces of material, whether it's a tumbler or some Baltic birch, you want to try using the laser, but you have no idea what settings to use. I'd highly recommend you go into Thunder Laser USA's knowledge base. They have a free materials library you can easily download and install into Lightburn, and that gives you a variety of different materials with at least starting settings for you to start trying to use your laser. I wish I'd found that on day one. If you haven't downloaded that materials library from Thunder Laser USA, you could run into Lightburn and you're probably going to see dozens and dozens of videos of people running what they call material test cards. They're a good way to get some kind of basic settings or to see some results based on speed and power. It's a kind of a standard templated card. You put it in for whatever material, you run it, and you'll see the results in real time of what different settings will give you. However, I'd strongly caution and recommend that if you're running those test cards, you keep your eye in this window on that card and keep your hand close to the stop button, because some of the cards will have different settings, and when you get to extreme settings, such as, for example, really slow speed and a high power, some materials may catch fire. I've seen that twice now on YouTube. So just keep an eye on it, keep your hand on the button, and watch it for any flaming. I think they provide a good opportunity to give you some testing and some comparison of results, because each one of us have different preferences as to how brown and engrave, for example, on plywood we want, or how light and engrave, or how deep and engrave. And those cards will give you a great idea, or at least some directional perspective as to where to start with your settings. The other nice thing about the cards, I believe those test cards also allow you the opportunity to change the comparison or the groupings of settings. But keeping in mind you're brand new to lasers like I am, you have no idea what setting groupings to put together on that card. So keep an eye in the window, keep your hand on the button, and you'll get yourself some kind of starting settings and an idea of what your material is going to look like under different combinations. Come on. If it's helpful to know, if you are doing tumblers or dog bowls or any type of powder coated materials, if your settings are good, you should honestly not need anything else but a few squirts of Dawn Power Wash and a soft sponge and warm water. That's all you should need. You finish, take it off the rotary, get it into the sink, give it a spray with the power wash, leave it for 20 or 30 seconds, and then wipe it down under the water with your sponge. I'd highly recommend you never use the abrasive side. You'll see the results or the marring on the power coat if you use the abrasive side. Only the soft sponge. What I found so far is most colors will come off really easily. The only ones I've had a little problem with is the oranges and greens, whether it's bowls or tumblers. And sometimes you need a little more power wash, and every once in a while you'll get that really weird spot that you might need a magic eraser, but don't scrub too hard with it. It will remove or mar your powder coat around your engrave, not just the engrave. So I always use this as a last resort, but generally teal, blues, blacks, reds, those colors in powder coat will clean up really nicely if you've got the same settings that I provided you folks. If you get to the greens and the oranges, those kind of colors, you're going to find you need to do a little more cleaning to get them nice and shiny. If a simple squirt of this power wash in 20 seconds and this soft sponge doesn't clean up that engrave nice and pretty, I think you need to go back and keep working on your settings. It should not be hard to clean off those tumblers. It should be a pretty quick job if your settings are bang on. So despite what I've seen on a number of different YouTube channels, I'm finding that working with acrylics on the bolt is awesome. I'm actually really loving acrylics. And as you folks have seen over the last few weeks, I've been doing a number of different signs, a number of different templates, designs, using different colored acrylics. The settings that I provided you good folks previously in the videos have worked great for clear, orange, red, gray, black, white, And those cut settings will work whether you have a paper mask or film on your acrylic sheet, or if they come with a plastic film on either side. However, if you're using green, it's the only color I've found so far that when I'm trying to cut this, I need to make sure that I cut it twice. So I use the same setting, but instead of one pass, I use two. I'm not sure what it is about green, but it won't go through all the way on that first pass. So I just recut it twice. Or when I send it to the bolt, I'll go into the number of cuts and I just change it to 2 passes. And then she goes right through nice and clean. What I've also learned is that my engrave settings also work if it comes with the paper film. Works great. But if you attempt to engrave one of your acrylic sheets that comes with this plastic film, it doesn't work out very well. In fact, you'll get this. I'm not sure if you can see that, but the plastic film bubbles up and melts into the acrylic when you try to engrave it. So, as I'd mentioned before, if I'm engraving it, I'll usually leave the paper on with those settings because it engraves through it great, and it also minimizes cleanup. If the pieces come with a plastic film, I'll take the film off and I'll put paper transfer tape or paper mask over top of it instead. That way it minimizes my cleanup, as you guys have seen, and it also allows the engrave to come through nice and clean. No mess. And speaking of acrylics, so far I've tried a couple of different means by which to put my pieces or to bond or glue my acrylic designs together. I've tried the 3M adhesive that goes on the back of the piece. I've tried a couple of solvents, this Weld-On number 4, as well as a Susco Bond it's called up here in Ontario. And most recently I've been also testing this product by Grip. It's number 16 Fast Set. It's like a cement for acrylics. They all have their pros and cons. If you're working with any of these types of chemical products, I'd highly recommend you make sure you're ventilated and you've got to wear these vinyl gloves. This stuff works instantly. As soon as it touches your skin, it will absorb into your skin. And myself, I made a bit of an error a couple of weeks ago. I was pouring it without the gloves on, got some on my hands, and literally within 20 to 30 seconds, my fingers began to ache. And I had to make it to the sink, wash them off really thoroughly. It's that quick. So try to make sure you keep your gloves on. The pros of this dimethylchloride, this number 4 Weld-On product, it adheres very quickly. You've got about 1 to 2 minutes, it says, working time before it starts to fix. It's actually a lot shorter than that, I found. Literally, with the second you drop it on the acrylic, it begins to evaporate and starts to melt it. And you've got a very short window to get those two pieces together and hold them. The pro of it is it will bond or fix very quickly. It basically says within 3 minutes, that's what they call the fixture time, which means it's reasonably well adhered. However, it takes 3 days for it to get to it 80% cured. It's a long period of time. It's a very watery substance. You folks have seen me use it, and it's very difficult to use. It's very easy to drip it or to apply too much. I was speaking to my supplier last week. I asked him, what am I doing wrong? Is there some tricks or something? How do I stop it from dripping or putting too much on the piece? And he smiled up at me gently, and he just said, lots of experience. I can believe it. It runs like water, but as you get more experience, I find that I'm dripping less, and I'll get back to that in a minute. Your 3M, excellent product, of course, high tack. The challenge is that you don't get a second chance with it. Once you put those two pieces together, it's tacked, it's stuck. And if you slightly altered it or you don't have it properly squared up on your piece, you can't move it again without ripping them apart. And that usually causes damage to one piece or the other, or you find pieces of the 3M on one piece or the other. In essence, the piece is kind of ruined. And unless somebody has a trick for how to remove it and replace it again, I haven't figured it out yet. This last product from Grip, this is more syrupy. So that in of itself has its challenges. The one thing is that's a benefit to me is there's 5 to 6 minutes working time. So instead of being watery and accidentally squirting it or dripping it, it's a syrup, so you can apply it much more consistently or in a more managed fashion. You've got much more time to move your pieces together and get them into place before it begins to fix or harden, so to speak. And on top of that, it is 80% cured within 24 hours. What I have found over the last few weeks is that each of these products has a use. For example, on this piece here, I used the number 16 cement product on pretty much everything that I put together except these tiny little stitch marks here at the top. Just would not work, kind of difficult working with the syrup. So what I did do is I took the weld-on number 4 and the syringe in order to get these to bond together quickly and get them fixed quickly so they wouldn't fall over or move out of place. Worked great. The 3M, I generally so far have found I use that mostly for backing. I haven't put it on yet. I will at some point try using them between pieces. However, remember, I engrave pockets in my backplate to fix my other pieces. And the 3M needs a nice, clean, flat surface to adhere to. And I don't know how well it's going to work if I try to stick it into an engraved pocket, which is not necessarily exactly flat or smooth. The last thing I'll leave you with on acrylics, you may have noticed on each of the projects, the very last thing I ever do is remove the mask or the film or the paper. I leave it on until after I'm done all the bonding and the cementing. In the event that I drip it or I put too much on, it allows the paper to help minimize any marring or any scarring on the surface of the acrylic that gets through. There's a number of different tools and accessories and supplies that you're going to find you're going to need to purchase or to acquire, but I highly recommend if you do not have an air compressor, buy an air compressor. Even a small one like I have, I think it's a 2-gallon, it'll give you 100 psi, but cleaning materials now is so much easier if you hit it with the air and get all of that loose residue out of the material before you begin cleaning it. It literally will cut your cleaning time in half or more, because that way you're not smearing or moving loose residue into your material while you're trying to clean it. Get it all out with the air compressor first, then take it to the Dawn dish soap or the magic eraser or your acrylic cleaner or whatever else it is that you use. So the big question, would I buy this bolt again? For those that are new to the channel, I am not sponsored by Thunder Laser. I don't get paid commissions. I'll give you my honest answer. As a brand new laser owner in a shop, starting a business and starting to learn how to use the laser, hands down, I would purchase this unit again, without question. I did 7 or 8 months of research on all kinds of different brands, different makes, different sizes, types of lasers, and at the end of the day, it is still my opinion that dollar for dollar, feature for feature, this is the best bang for the dollar. I literally have not one single complaint on this unit. It performs extraordinarily well. After 6 months and all the different materials I've run through it, it is a high-performing, very exacting machine. As I look back, I have considered, would I have bought a larger bed? Something with a bigger space. And it would be nice to have it because I've already had to turn down a few jobs that were much larger than the 12 by 20. But I believe this is the right place to start because most of the things I like building or making fit in this bed. I believe that over time, if the business continues to grow, as I hope it will, there will be a point in time when it makes sense to buy a much larger laser with a much larger bed on it. So I can do some of those larger projects. But hands down, 99% of what I need right now, starting out, is all able to fit in this 12 by 20 bed. And for the few jobs you may lose or not be able to accomplish, those are indications going forward that if that happens more and more often, then maybe the choice or the decision to add another laser with a bigger bed will come a little quicker than I anticipate. I'm also looking at UV and fiber type lasers because that also expands my ability to do different other products. But at the end of the day, I am 100% happy with the choice. Like I said, I have nothing bad to say about this laser. It has performed extraordinarily well for me. So if you're looking at the Bolt or different types of lasers with this size of bed or this type of functionality, I'd highly recommend you do a good feature to feature advantage or benefit to benefit comparison, including pricing. So I hope that's been helpful to you. Let's take a look at my sign. I think it turned out pretty nicely. Thanks for sticking around today. I hope this has been helpful for folks that are looking at their first laser or those of you that are just new to the Bolt. Enjoy your machine. Try different products on it and different types of materials. I try to make sure that I leave you all of my settings in my videos so that you have a chance to try it yourself at home. And by all means, they may not be perfect settings, but at least it gives you a place to start. Have a great week out there. Please be kind to one another. And I'll see you again here on Laser Nug. Cheers.